Hi, I'm Tom Migot from Tom Migot Photography, and I'm here again in the tunnel with Megan here, who's getting really cold. Thankfully, this is the last video of the series, so our third video. In the two previous ones, we talked about the role of the shutter and the role of the ISO when we do flash photography. Well, today we're going to talk about the role of the aperture in flash photography. We know the role of aperture in standard photography. We know that the more we open the aperture, the more light comes in, and then if we want to have a correct exposure, then we're going to use the two other factors, the ISO and the shutter, to compensate and get a correct exposure. But in flash photography, we're going to see it doesn't work this way. We already saw the role of the shutter. We noticed that the shutter actually deals with the ambient light, but not the light on our subject. And we saw that the ISO actually, it doesn't care, it brings the exposure up for everything, the ambient light and our subject. So here we're going to see the role of the aperture. My settings, well, it's easy. Just like the two other episodes, we've got a softbox here with the flash on a trigger. The flash is already set up in manual mode, and the flash power, it's half power to get a correct exposure on Megan's face. My camera has the trigger on it. It's a 5D Mark III. The setup is basically my sync speed 200th of a second, my aperture 6.3, and my ISO is going to be 400. So let's take a first shot. What you can see here clearly, with the exception of the light from the ceiling, the only light that Megan is lit up by is basically the softbox. So that's how we got the correct exposure, just by the softbox. So let's see now if I actually reduce my aperture, meaning that I'm actually increasing its value. So from 6.3, let's bring it up to f11, for example. So I'm going to f11 and I'm taking the same shot. I'm not changing my flash power, I'm not changing my shutter, and I'm not changing my ISO. So let's see what we get. You notice now that we have even less power. The ambient light did not change, but the power of the light, or the appearance of the power, basically the exposure on Megan's face, has reduced significantly. So now let's go back to 6.3, and then we're actually going to go down to f4. So let's go down to f4, and let's take an exposure. You notice now that at f4, without changing my ISO, without changing my shutter speed, at f4, Megan is overexposed. The light, look at the graffiti, they almost burned up. So now you understand the role of the aperture in flash photography is to basically handle the exposure on your subject when this one is actually lit up only by the flash. It does not affect the ambient light. You notice that we actually increased here. We went to f4, we opened up, but there's no more light on the ambient scene. You don't see the tunnel at all. So it didn't have any effect on this. The only effect it had was on Megan. So, and this closed the last episode of the exposure triangle factors for flash photography. Until next time, hey, you want to know more? Why don't you go to see my blog on tommigotphotography.com. Every video that I've ever released since 2012 has an article with it. And sometimes there's actually more detail in the blog than in the video just because I forgot. So, ciao.